All right, Friday of last week, I sent you guys an email, and contained in that email was a handout about the French and Indian War. Chapter 6, the global fight for North America, I think it was. I encourage you guys to read that. There was a guided reading using that book, on your desk that you could have filled out. If you did that, great. If you didn't, you're a little bit behind the curve here, but it's not that big. Here's what we need to know about the French and Indians, okay? It was a conflict between Great Britain and France. Over what? What were they fighting for here specifically? Land. Okay, now listen, you gotta put this into context. Remember, mercantilism was the prevailing economic theory of the day. The country with the most money is the most powerful. Great Britain was making vast sums of money from her American colonies. They're both a market for finished goods and a source of raw materials. France was doing the same thing from her American colonies. They looked a little bit different, the French colonies did. But they were making a lot of money as well. Eventually, though, Great Britain and France got into a war. They fought many, many wars over the course of history. France and Great Britain don't particularly like each other. But here in the Americas, it was a little bit different. Now, you need to understand, during the French and Indian War, it's also referred to sometimes as the 7 Years' War, even though it lasted about 9 years. The French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, wasn't fought just here in North America. It was also fought in Europe. It was also fought in Asia. Great Britain and France had a great deal of conflict in India, for example. But our story is here, so we need to be concerned with this. On one side, we got Great Britain. Plus who? Who was helping Great Britain during the French and Indian War?
The colonies.
The colonists were? Who else? Some Native American tribes. Tribes that were allied with the British. Versus France, her colonists, and Native American tribes. The Iroquois, for example, your homework from last week, they allied with the British. Why did they do that? Why do people form alliances? What do they think it's going to do?
To get strong.
It's going to help them in some way, shape, or form, right? Does it always work out that way?
No.
It didn't for the Iroquois. But in the French and Indian War, Great Britain and her colonists versus certain Native American tribes versus France, her colonists, and certain Native Americans. Don't need to worry about the ins and outs of the war all that much. I will say this, that the American colonists in particular learned some new tactics from this particular conflict. Guerrilla warfare, for example, was something that they picked up. Are you familiar with that?
Who picked that up?
The colonists. George Washington was a leader of some colonial regiments, and he learned some guerrilla tactics. Guerrilla warfare is where a smaller group hits a larger group and then kind of runs away. Instead of standing toe-to-toe with them, you hit and run. You want to preserve your forces, that's a good way to do it. But whatever the case might have been, what do we know about war? Somebody tell me something about war.
Expensive.
It's expensive. It costs a lot of money. And the French and Indian War was no different. What else happens in war? You spend a lot of money, what else?
They lose people.
People die. What happens to property?
Damage.
It gets destroyed, sure. So wars cost a lot of money, they cost a lot of blood, they cost a lot of treasure. This war was no different. It was pretty brutal in many ways. Native Americans, when they fought each other, they were always fighting for land, for access to hunting grounds or for water or whatever. And as a result of that, when they fought other Native American tribes, everybody in that tribe was fair game. It wasn't just like the soldiers or the warriors that we might think of that. So men, women, children, old people, they all got killed. And sometimes they did it in some pretty brutal ways. Well, during the French and Indian War, we started to see those same tactics be used by both the British and the American colonists as well. Scalping became pretty commonplace. The desecration of bodies, pretty commonplace. Pretty brutal. Well, when it was all said and done, who won? Great Britain did. And how do we know that? What language do we speak? English. If the French had won, what would we be speaking? We. Yes, yeah. Anybody speak French? I took French 1, 2, and 3 in high school. I took French 1, 2, and 3 in college. And I can order a ham and cheese sandwich and a beer. And that's about it. Baguette, Mitch, jambon, et fromage, s'il vous plaît. Une bière.
That was good.
Merci beaucoup. And I can ask where the library is. So. Bibliothèque. My German is much better than my French. I was in France last November, and every time I tried to speak French to somebody, they immediately replied to me in English. It was very dispiriting. Whatever. All right, so Great Britain wins. And what do they win?
Land.
Land. Specifically land where? Here in North America. What happened to the French? They lost. They got kicked out. France lost pretty much all of her territories here in North America. Now there's a little piece of Canada off the coast of Canada that is still part of France today. 2 little islands called Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. That's about it. There's still a French-speaking province in Canada because it was settled by people from France. Anybody know which province that is?
No. Nope.
Quebec. Yeah. So if you go to Montreal, if you go to Quebec City, they speak French. Actually, it's kind of like a dialect called Quebecois, which French and English kind of mix together. But Great Britain wins, right? And one of the things that they win is land. This is what they're fighting for. They're fighting for dominance in North America. And why do they want to dominate North America? Because of all the riches that they can get from North America. Again, think about all those natural resources that we talked about. Fur, fish, timber, cotton, tobacco, rice, indigo, you name it. They could make a lot of money. And when Great Britain won, this was a huge win for them. And the colonists, in particular, many of whom had fought for the British during this war, were pretty excited as well, because they got all this new land. And where did the colonists want to go? To this new land, the Ohio River Valley. They couldn't wait to go across the Appalachian Mountains and make it there and make a new life. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris of 1763. The first of many treaties of Paris that we'll talk about in APO's history. There's the Treaty of Paris of 1763, there's the Treaty of Paris of 1783, Treaty of Paris of 1812. We'll talk about quite a few of them. But almost immediately after this treaty was signed, after Great Britain won this land, Parliament passed this. And this is where it all kind of hits the fan for the colonists and Great Britain. Almost immediately after signing the Treaty of Paris, Parliament signs something called the Proclamation of 1763. And here's what that said. There can be no settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. All that territory that Great Britain had just won from France, that territory that many of the colonists themselves had fought for, that territory that the colonists were rip-roared and ready to go settle, Great Britain said, nope, sorry, you can't move. Pay for it. We're not going to allow people to move west of the Appalachian Mountains. Do we know why that was? You read that stuff on Friday. You should have an indication. What was Great Britain concerned about?
Native Americans.
They were worried about conflict with Native Americans, exactly. Worried about conflict with the natives. Now, let me say something about Native Americans really quickly before we move on, okay? We've talked about them a little bit up to this point. We will talk about them quite a bit more when we get to both the early 1800s and the late 1800s. When Native Americans first encountered Europeans, oftentimes they kind of took pity on them, right? Think about those guys at Jamestown. They didn't know how to farm, they didn't know how to hunt, they didn't know how to fish, at least it didn't seem like it. So they helped them out some. Up in Massachusetts, during that first Pilgrim Thanksgiving, Massasoit, the king of the Wampanoag tribe, he helped them out as well. So oftentimes Native Americans would help Europeans. But as more and more and more Europeans began to arrive on the shores of North America, how do you think Native Americans felt about them then? There's too many of them. And what were they doing to Native Americans? What did they want from Native Americans? Their land. And so they pushed them off the land. Sometimes they killed them outright. Sometimes Native Americans died from disease. If everybody in your community got sick because they were exposed to some weird pathogen that Europeans brought from Europe, how many of you would want to be around those Europeans? You wouldn't. So Native Americans really had three things that they could do when they were encountering Europeans. And the first thing is what most of us would probably do. You've got some land, this is your home, somebody from someplace else comes in and tries to take your land. What are you gonna do? You're gonna fight? Absolutely you are. And Native Americans fought valiantly, but they almost always lost. How come?
It was too many Europeans.
Not too many. Technological superiority. If you bring a knife to a gunfight, you're probably gonna lose. Europeans had guns, Native Americans didn't. It's just that simple. Weaponry was the key. So Native Americans could fight, but if they fought, they were probably gonna die. They could move, which lots of them did, but if they're moving, whose territory are they moving into? Somebody else's, and now they got conflict with those. And remember, Native American tribes didn't see each other as the same. They were different traditions, different customs, different religions, different ways of doing it, different language. So Native Americans could fight and die. They could move and have conflict with others. But what was the third thing they could do? And they tried to do this quite a bit. What's that? To try and assimilate into European culture. There's a new way of doing things, fine, we'll be like you guys. We'll dress like you, we'll get a job like you, we'll settle down like you. But that didn't work either. And when we talk about the Cherokee, when we get to Jacksonian democracy, we'll find out that they had assimilated better than anybody, and they still got forced to leave there. Okay? So Great Britain knew this. Great Britain knew that if there was a huge influx of colonists going west across the Appalachian Mountains into the Ohio River Valley, that there was gonna be conflict with Native Americans. And what did we just say about war? It's expensive. It costs a lot of lives, a lot of money, a lot of treasure. So they put in place this proclamation of 1763. Now, think back to what we were talking about before break. Were the colonists used to having the British impose their authority? No, not at all. They've been doing what they wanted to do basically unchecked for well over 100 years. In some places, 150 years. And now, all of a sudden, just like that, Great Britain says, we're in charge. You have to do what we say. And just like a teenager might buck their mom and dad, what do you think the colonists did? That very thing. They were not happy at all. They couldn't believe that they weren't able to do what they wanted to. They'd always done what they wanted to. And when you add to that the fact that Great Britain left some 10,000 troops in the colonies, things really started to get pretty dicey. Colonists were like, what are you doing? Why are you leaving troops here? Take care of ourselves. We don't need 10,000 British soldiers stationed amongst us. They got nothing to do here. Send them home. We got our own militia. You got your driver's license. Your parents got your car. You got to drive wherever you wanted to. free of any encumbrances whatsoever. And then one day, out of the blue, your mom says, "Hey, let me see your phone. We're giving LifeLock 360 on your phone." So what's it called? LifeLock?
Life 360.
Life 360. Okay, whatever. And now, what can your parents see? Where you go, how fast you go, where your car's gone. Are you happy? You had all this freedom, and now you don't. Just like the colonists, not happy at all. And then it gets worse. In 1764, we get a brand new prime minister in Great Britain, a guy by the name of George Grenville. And George Grenville saw the situation like this. Remember, wars cost a lot of money. Great Britain had spent a lot of money. Great Britain is now in debt. Grenville looks at it like this. Look, we fought this war in part to protect the colonists. We didn't fight it, they'd all be speaking French. We have this massive debt. The colonists ought to help out. They should have to pay just a little bit. So in 1764, he passed something called the Sugar Act. It was a tax on sugar. What did the colonists use sugar for? What did they make out of it? Molasses. What did they make out of molasses? Rum. This was not something that sat well with them. And also, the Sugar Act started to enforce the smuggling laws. Houston has been a smuggler for 30 years. He's been running sugar back and forth from the Bahamas his entire adult life. Never once had to pay a tax. Never once encountered a British ship or a British agent telling him he needed to follow the law. And then at the drop of a hat, all of a sudden, they come and they seize his ship and all of his sugar, hurting his livelihood. Is Houston a happy man? He is not. And by the end of 1764, the colonies in Great Britain started to disagree more and more about how the colonies should be governed. The colonists thought that who got to govern the colonies?
The colony?
They did. Great Britain was like, no, you're British citizens. We're in charge. Mom and Dad let you have the run of the house, and now you're confined to the basement. Mom and Dad have never punished you before, and now you're getting spanked. How many of you guys in here got spanked when you were a child? How many of you still get spanked? Do you? Slap? Leg. Spoon? I had to go get my own belt when I was a kid. Like, add insult to injury. Go get your belt. Jeez. So I decided when I had kids that I was not going to hit them, and what I would do instead was just lock them in the closet. I'm kidding.
Oh.
Get in the closet! Stupid little bastard.
Oh my God.
I'm kidding, that would be a terrible thing to say. Why would I say that? I did spank him though. It turned out okay. Oh, maybe I just got a text from my daughter. Let's see if she's okay. Good. She must want something. She's sending the comments. All right, so the Sugar Act starts to get problems with the colonists, and then the Stamp Act is passed 1765. Now, here's how the Stamp Act worked, all right? And we're going to watch a short video on Monday that kind of details this a little bit more. The Stamp Act was a law that was put in place specifically by Great Britain to try and raise revenue in the colonies. And essentially, here's what the Stamp Act said. If you have any printed material, anything that is printed, you have to buy a tax stamp for it. Sometimes the stamp was put directly on pieces of paper, sometimes it's done after the fact. But any printed material is gonna have to be taxed so that Great Britain can get some money. Now, truth be told, for a lot of people in the colonies, this really didn't mean anything to them at all. If you're out on the frontier, if you are trying to make your living on a farm someplace a long way from town, you probably don't really have any printed materials in your house at all anyway. You might have an almanac, you might have a Bible. But how often are you going to town to buy something that is on paper? Never, right? What about if you're a lawyer? They use a lot of paper? They do. And if you had to have a tax stamp on every piece of paper, that's gonna get pretty expensive. What about if you're a newspaper man and your job is to make broadsheets so that you can sell them to people so they can read the news? Is that gonna impact your business? Of course it is. What if you're a tavern owner and you decide that you're gonna get some new menus printed up? Well, now you gotta pay that tax stamp. Anything that was printed, from documents, licenses, newspapers, pamphlets, almanacs, playing cards, dice, you name it, everything had to have a tax stamp. And the colonists lost their minds, especially people in cities, and I can't stress that enough. The reaction to the Stamp Act was largely an urban phenomenon. People in urban areas almost immediately pushed back. Asher has gotten himself a job as a colonial agent. He works for Great Britain. A lot of people do. He didn't think anything about it, it's just a job. But then the British Parliament passes the Stamp Act, and it's his job to go and collect those tax stamps. And now his neighbors aren't very happy with it. So when he gets up to go to work in the morning, guess what they do? They follow him. Throw snowballs at him. Call him bad names. He gets home in the evening. People stand outside in the street in front of his house and beat pots and pans. Say bad things about his kids. Your wife's a whore! Selling tax stamps for the government. Traitor. But then they start to assault him. Hide out behind a wall when he turns the corner. Oh, sell that. And they might actually tar and feather. You guys heard of that before? Being tarred and feathered? That was an actual thing. Have you ever had tar on you before? Get it in your hands, it's really hard to get off. But if someone makes you roll around in hot tar and then roll around in chicken feathers, is that going to be easy to get off? Not at all. And in fact, I think you guys looked at a picture of that yesterday. Page 108 in that book under your desk, there's a little picture of a guy being tarred and feathered, a royal stamp agent, pouring tea down his throat. Why did they do that? Taxes. Taxes that we didn't vote for. Taxes that we didn't have any say-so in. Taxes that you're imposing on us without our say-so. We're in charge. The colonists have been doing things ourselves forever. And now they tell us we have to pay a stamp tax for not doing it at all. And what came about next was a group that we'll talk about quite a bit tomorrow and moving forward. A group called the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty. These are colonial agitators, if you will. These are the guys who are harassing stamp agents by calling them names, hurling insults at them, throwing oyster shells at the back of their head when they walk down the street. Anybody know who founded the Sons of Liberty? Nope. Another famous American. John Adams? His cousin. You probably recognize his name. Samuel Adams. Does that ring a bell? From Boston. That's right. It is a beer. And you know why that brewer in Boston named his beer after Samuel Adams? Because Samuel Adams is from Boston, and he at one time was a brewer himself. Very influential and powerful political activist, Samuel Adams found his calling in life when he formed the Sons of Liberty. We'll talk about him quite a bit more tomorrow as well, and another group that he formed a little bit later on. But here's what these guys did. They harassed customs agents. If you go down to the harbor and someone is trying to collect a tax on you because you didn't first send your goods to Great Britain, you can expect the Sons of Liberty to give you a hard time. If you're a stamp agent, someone who's trying to collect that tax, you can expect the Sons of Liberty to harass you. Royal governors, the same thing, Sons of Liberty. These are the guys who are out in the streets, physically assaulting people, verbally belittling them, making their life very difficult. And they did it really, really well. In fact, they harassed these guys so much. Guess what Asher did after a couple of days of people standing outside his house and throwing things at him when he walked down the street? He quit?
Oh.
Not doing that.
Oh my God.
Are you kidding me? Somebody else can sell that tax then. I'll find another job. I can do something else. The Sons of Liberty were so persuasive, and they harassed these royal agents to such a degree that most of them quit. In fact, there were never any stamps that were actually sold. Now here's the key with this. When this tactic worked, when Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty found out that the Stamp Act is going to be repealed because of their actions, what did that tell them that they should do? If we can get our way by harassing royal agents, what are we going to continue to do? Harass those royal agents. Exactly. Just like you and your parents. Oh, Mom, you look so pretty today. I love you, Mommy. Oh. You know, I need some gas in my car. I said, I just got a text from my daughter. She gave me a compliment about something. I don't know what she wants. It's coming. I know it is. Maybe not. Maybe she's just being nice. You guys know how to manipulate your folks. Whether you admit it or not. Which one's easier, Mom or Dad?
Mom.
Depends. Depends on what you want, right? But when you find a tactic that works,
My dad has no
what do?
You're using it.
You're using it again. And that's exactly what the Sons of Liberty did. They figured out that they could get their way by stomping their feet and throwing a fit. Now hopefully you guys still aren't doing that. Anybody in here throwing a little hissy fit? No? You used to though, I know you do. Absolutely. 5 and 6 year olds, terrible human beings. They grow out of it, but who's the biggest fit thrower? Look around. Camden? She's leaving a huff like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
He still does that.
Does it work?
Yeah.
It ain't working in here.
I'll hit answer now.
Yes, you will.
Oh.
Try it. That's my question. Go ahead.
It doesn't work like that. It's like if I want to do something.
I said to ask me a question.
Nah.
No, I haven't read that quiz yet.
Oh.
That probably won't matter anyway.
Alright. That's
Go ahead and grade it real quick.
No, let's not.
Oh, maybe we will.
Y'all are ruthless. I hope you all remember this. I'm gonna slash your call.
2,
Oh my
4,
God.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You only answered 11.
That is a lie. I know there's 12.
very well.
Alright.
This is gonna be fun.
No, it's not.
No, yes,
Watch Cam to give him a look like I see you harassing.
I don't harass anybody.
You should.
Oh, no.
Is it true?
Uh,
Alright, any questions about what we've talked about today?
No.
Alright, you guys got, about, too much time. Should be about 15 minutes left to get done just a little bit earlier. Listen, here's what I'm gonna tell you to do, alright? If you have not finished your homework yet, get it done so you can turn it in tomorrow for extra. Camden and, Mr. Hernandez, if you wanna work on a handout that I gave you at the beginning of the period for a grade, now would be a good time to do that, okay? If you haven't read that handout from chapter 7 yet, read it.